Good evening. Welcome to this poetry reading on Poetry Day Ireland. I'd like to start with a very optimistic prose which I wrote a couple of years ago, and is from my collection, Those April Fevers. The world is mine. From Antrim to Wexford, the sun steals over the shores grey hem. On estuaries, in the bright estates that curve like spines on the edges of towns. Here is the pace of a summer morning, a lone walker with dogs on a beach, new light pouring into the hollows of shells, along the slow glint of dunes where grasses dip sculptural and silver. What I want is to know that this can continue, that other mornings I remember as folds and bolts of light, the shouting and crosshatch of bird annunciations, the rustle of small animals as they move back for another day in a burrow's darkness, will stay safe. Is it a question of time? The atmosphere is thinner, earth threadbare from a steady weave of hands and neurons as we make space for millions, while ice caps melt and deserts spread like spilled ochre. This morning, those yellows fall moistly on the shorelines. Light has pushed across hills, through the tillage-acred fields of Kildare, flashing the duns and greys of horses riding out at the Curragh's long acres. On to the bog's wild cottons, stirring larks, a lone heron holding taut in a meditation of water, a flash of young trout. Finally, the Shannon is lit, cataracts and bubbles brighten through the west and its days of shifting emigrants, students, hopes of dolphins drawing them home as if to healing. From Antrim to Wexford, sun has spilt across the sleeping island, till Galway, Limerick steady themselves into full colour, as I once steadied myself when I was 10 and watched an orchard brightening, seized my day. And now, another July. We are waking and working to our worlds, what is known and unknown, the world still mine. And before that, ever before that type of poem evolved in my practice, many years ago when I had about 12 poems written and maybe a few of them published, I met Yvonne Boland, who we are all mourning at the moment, and she is a tremendous loss, not just to poets but to readers everywhere. And this is one of the poems that I showed her early on in those days, in 1983 when I first met her. And she was genuinely interested, curious, very frank in her responses. And the importance of someone who says a few words, who is, if not exactly a mentor, someone who you register with, can't be underestimated. And other people who have helped me on my way would include John F. Dean. So I'll read this poem, Antarctica, and I dedicate it to Yvonne Boland. I do not know what other women know. I covet their children. Wardrobes stocked with blue or pink. Froth lace bootees for the animal child that bleeds them. Their calmness settles like the ebb tide on island shores, nursing pearl conch, secret fronds of wisdom, certitude. Their bellies taunt. I do not know what other women know. Breasts await the animal child. I want, maddened by lunar crumblings, the false prophecy of tingling breasts, turgid abdomen. Antarctica, the stormy petrel hovers, waters petrified by spittled winds. Little fish will not swim here. Folds of bedsheet take my face. Blood seeps again. But you are free, they cry. You have no child. Bitterness from women grafted like young willows, forced before time. In Antarctica, who will share this freedom? I'm very interested in the role of language and in the way in which languages come into existence for centuries and then gradually fade. And I came to be interested in the Galician language after I first visited that part of Spain in 2006. This poem is called Galician Watchdog, and I dedicated it to Manuela Palacios. Manoli says the farmers are not sentimental. The chained fawn dog guards the house, watches what moves within the mist, his ears like pinnacles. If the sun flares on a wet stone, he barks. If the farmer's granddaughter exclaims at new lambs, his ears swallow her voice. He barks thrice, then stops. She speaks to her grandfather in the mother tongue. Manoli says that once they go to school, they lose the words. The fawn dog watches cyclists, children, sheep, caped men bound for Finisterre, frustrated by those with permission to walk. Around him, the world gulps some words, vomits others. He knows his place. He knows he has no say. This poem is called A Boy in Gaza, and I wrote it in response to a newspaper photograph which I saw during one of the many bombings of Gaza. Will he remember how his sister dragged him from the street just after the explosion? How, running, she carried him through rubble? Eyes wide, her legs stretched in flight as she leaped across smashed melons, pulped figs, and open-mouthed still faces. In the photo, her brother's trousers are stained with blood spatters, dust. Her hair is a nest above her ears, grey with exploded particles. One arm clenches his small body against her hip as she races for their lives, agile as a fleeing deer from a flaming forest. Her right foot frozen forever, poised in flight, not yet grounded, as she avoids broken dervishes of mothers, men bawling like beasts for one another, for their children. She avoids too the flown daggers of wood that could pinion her flesh or his if she puts one foot wrong. Will he remember his fleeing sister? Now, the next poem I'd like to read is from the Ark Builders, and this one is called The Poulnabrone Dolman, and it's about my daughter, but it's also about, I think it's about attitudes to Irish culture and the way in which, you know, there are certain accepted attitudes that all traditional culture is a good thing in itself. And sometimes it takes the young to make us sit up and question, well, you know, culture is not a medicine. It is something that one absorbs in different ways. The Poulnabrone Dolman. She scowls at the horizon, opens up her phone, trails us on the holiday route. Every comment that day announces sullen unsurprise. Girl, frog marched, texting through the burren. All those sad rocks, she moans. We inflict on her our Celtic marvels, the ancient dead within stone chambers, porticos and grikes. After, a photo shows a cloud bank, the capstone, her averted face. The dolman shouldering the sky, squat-haunched in a wilderness, as much itself in spleen as she is now. I touch the stone as if to feel it breathe. Instead, I brush against my daughter's rightful grit as she resists the culture of the tribe that today tells her things she does not want to know. This next poem is called Waiting Outside Bewley's. And Bewley's has it really has quite a callback for me, because it goes right back to, as far as I'm concerned, I remember my grandmother falling in it years ago. I remember meeting my mother in it years ago. And since then, I have occasionally met my daughter there. So you have 4 generations of women in Bewley's. And this is called Waiting Outside Bewley's. At that doorway, how often have I glided, smooth-hipped through crowds, to see my mother wait with glossy packages on looped string. She never recognized me until I was before her, but pretended. I saw you, she proclaimed. You move like a hot knife through butter. And once grandmother's shoe heel snagged on the cafe stairs and she fell. We helped her up, reassembled her country dignity. Yesterday, I lolled in soft pause of coffee air just beside the counter. Shoppers streamed. Magazine sellers changed coins. The bells of Clarendon Street Church rang out, so that I, distracted, did not see this daughter hot knife her way along until she pulled up short before me. Loops of hair damp with drizzle as she smiled. Was she grace or fate? What half-remembered female from the staircase of the past now gazed from her eyes at me? Inside, we ordered buns and coffee, settled down to pass the fragments of our rings, sweeter recognition, not just icing. And I'd like to read a few more recent poems now. Some of these will go into my forthcoming collection, Massacre of the Birds, which comes out with Salmon Publishing next autumn. And a change of gear. I'm the kind of poet that I can be quite lyrical, and sometimes, you know, I am very much a nature person. I have a very powerful response to nature. It means a great deal to me. But there is another side of me that came through the 70s that is informed by humanism and naturally feminism. This poem is called Me Too, 12 Remembered Scenes and a Line. 1968, County Wexford, the light flick of the Colonel's hand up my summer dress as I dart from the hotel stairwell. 1970, Leeson Street, the priest with a November evening burning appetite for PG Woodhouse by my hospital bed. 1971, a lift home from a stranger, Sunnyvale Road. I fight to leave. He reaches over to squeeze my breast. I strike out and he swears. 1972, Carnival. Fermanagh. A disembodied hand shoots through the crowd, grabs my left breast. 1973, Leeson Park in spring, snowdrops, moss at the base of trees, an open raincoat, shock of white, the dark-stemmed pubis. 1974, Maynooth, a parked yellow Renault, snail trail of spunk on his thigh as I pass. 1976, Monaghan, a struggle in a car, his sweet aftershave, his sweat. He is small, I am strong enough. 1980, Croke Park, All Ireland Offaly Kerry semi-final, crotch groped on crammed concrete steps outside the toilets. 1980, Heidelberg in soft rain, sage green hills. The prof stares at my polo neck t-shirt, breathes too close, murmuring provocatif. 1986, the throng of a Turkey bus station, sips of hot tea, then crotch groped. 1994, Le Métro, Solferino and Rue du Bac, crotch groped in a crammed carriage. 2010, Sant'Agnello, between two cars, a young man stands unzipped, hand frantic as my daughter and I pass by. I was never raped. My mother remembers her Irish. Like Alice, she has fallen down the rabbit hole. In a room at the bottom, rejecting a bottle labelled "Drink Me," she reaches for the cracked urn of language. Speak me, it invites. White hair in disarray, she unstops it. The contents fizz up and over the lip of glaze as she recovers the sounds she forgot after schooling. Now she has broken away from the language bunker, its torqued English. Take to speech at the midnight hour. As if fighting the Jabberwocky, she uses old songs to push against a paralysis of chairlifts, walking frames. They emerge on her tongue, ancient oratorio. Shielta, be énach amórach, cadúirt tú a chaín álín, bhhaithlam dolawalya. Such softness that rarely found its way in English now honeys her tongue in the magical flight of Doge. Time released enriches conversation. Did you know that this republic was born 70 years ago today, years after the Moluccos in the town taught me Mussolini's anthem? We speak of Easter music, the St. Matthew Passion, her Ceol Cruiffach. She wonders if the sun will dance Easter Sunday morning on the hill above her house at Kilnadrain, where she wants to return sometime soon. Mohinton Fain, she adds. I am extremely concerned, as most people are, about the state of the biosphere, and of course, with the current virus, many of us are saying that we've done this to ourselves, and I do believe we've done it to ourselves, no matter the origin of the virus. So this poem is called Against Fishing, Hollywood Lake, County Monaghan. And, in the opening of it, I was thinking very much of Luther and his words about standing by his own conscience. God help me, he says. So on the lake shore of Con, woman also stands, nature struck. My unknown companion will recognize waterfowl, marvel at grebes, flamingos, as I too greet ducks and moorhens of this drumlin lake. She sprays herself against mosquitoes. Here, Polish families picnic with children and a shaggy puppy. Their voices echo, group about the swallows. Not so many the year, one remarks, then bites into a sandwich. Their murmurs greet me, sentiment about shy birds from other decades, corncrakes, cuckoos, finishing a beer. Toe as she prepares them for winter. In Argentina, Saturday night falls hours after I'm in bed. Even so, a mirror conversation rumbles on. My unknown woman friend. What happened to the chinchilla, the armadillo, giant otter? And who last heard of any jaguars? She bites into an olive, sips her wine. reminds herself to go again tomorrow to the lake. Years and reverse, hard not to judge. Argentina. See the white playboys pose with rifles over zebra, elephant, or Cape buffalo, as if this action was radiant. Lucent cloud threaded behind trees still cajoles. Briefly, we believe in the black reflection of a crannog, its single surviving sun, creating a moment of ease. But the seasons will not release us from mounting debt. On the lakeshore of living conscience, I stand. I can do no other. I'm just going to read two more short poems. One of them is, it's really based on a story told to me by a male friend about his trip to Cuba years ago. And it set me thinking. It's called Those Prostitutes in Cuba. They were like two kittens, he said, snuggling up to him. They were fun and they liked him. I thought, against my own sex, how enviable his freedom to fall in. It could never happen to a woman my age, two tiger men who would not wound, the three of us so human in a dusky room, sunlight stealing through the slats in colours from Matisse, the riotous world within and without. And I'm all in favour of that riotous world within and without. But there's also another world, and that's, the liminal in-between world, which we are living in between spaces. And this one is simply about my walks along the canal, and I make it my final poem. And it's about being very happy, actually, cut away from everything. Or at the moment, some of us writers. Kindly, I want to sympathise again to all of us and to everyone belonging to our dear national poet, Eavan Boland. And I think I'll dedicate this poem to her as well. Hanging house in a canal. It lay on the other side, the colour of country butter. I longed to enter any way I could, by door, window, chimney, found it locked. But there was a reflection, clear as a mirror in the still waters, the raised brows of dormer windows as it hung there, upside down, the poking nose of the porch, the comforting torso of walls. I stripped off, knew immediately what to do, dived, entered that beckoning house, its bubbling whispers an embrace as I burst through its porch reflection. Now, within, I am drowning in secrets, in the company of water rats, diving herons, grey roach and crayfish, with my own, as always. Thank you again for joining me, and thank you to the lovely people who have also left messages. I could see them popping up as I read. Thank you, and bye for now.